So what we saw was that as soon as we loaded the agent zip file into the Candidate Explorer tool over here, we knew that these two intents, the compose and the greetings, are candidates to fire at this step. So another way to look at it is that whichever intent fires has to be among these two here. So when the user comes and says, I want to buy a bouquet, you have to understand that the intent which is going to fire here has to be among the two that we just saw. And as I expected, the intent which actually fired is the one called compose, and the response is, okay, would you like to compose a bouquet yourself? Now here's the, I think this is where the tool's importance will actually come through. This is where the tool, you will understand what is going on with this tool here. Now as soon as this phrase was typed in by the user and as soon as the response came back, you notice that in Dialogflow's window you see these two contexts which have been set. So whatever appears here, it indicates the active context at that step in the conversation. Okay. In fact, if you go and look at the diagnostic info here, you'll even see their names listed, context, and then the name is compose, it has a lifespan of 5, and the name is bouquet and it has a lifespan of 5. Now in case you're wondering, this is using the API v1 because that is the one which was in effect when this agent was first introduced. That is, this is the, when you load the agent zip file, it automatically defaults to v1 because that's the, I guess it was still API v1 at the time when this agent was created. However, that doesn't change the behavior. You will find the exact same behavior for the agent even if you were to move to the v2 API. So look at the active context. They are the compose and bouquet contexts are now active. So what you can do in the Candidate Explorer is you can just click on these two contexts over here and you can see what happens. Now the thing with this is once I clicked on bouquet, that did not add anything to the candidate intents. However, when I click on compose, notice that it has now made no hyphen compose and yes hyphen compose also as candidate intents. So what is going on here? Let's take a look. The intents, in fact, let's also highlight the candidate intents so that it will make our job a little easier. The top two, compose and greetings, we are not that interested in because we know that they got activated because they don't have an input context. Now let's take a look at the intents which got activated just at this step. One of them is no hyphen compose, and you can see that the input context for this is compose and bouquet. And in the same way, we see that the yes hyphen compose intent also got activated. And in case you're wondering, the whole all the intents are listed in alphabetical order. Okay, so this intent is also having input context compose and bouquet. And the reason that neither of these intents became candidates when just bouquet alone was selected is because unless both the contexts in a given intent are active, it will not become a candidate. Like what I mean to say is, if you have multiple contexts in an intent, which is the case in this case, if you have multiple input contexts, to be clear, if you have multiple input contexts in an intent, unless both those contexts are active, that intent cannot be a candidate and it cannot fire at that step. In fact, that is pretty much the entire point of using these input contexts, because you can use them to guard your intent. You can use them as a way to make sure that your intent does not fire until the context that you are interested in is actually active. That is what has happened here, and you will notice that as soon as we selected bouquet and compose, we got these two additional intents, no hyphen compose and yes hyphen compose, becoming candidates at that step. Now if we take a look at the flowchart, you will see that no hyphen compose corresponds to this step in the conversation, and yes hyphen compose corresponds to this step in the conversation. That is, if when the bot says, would you like to compose a bouquet yourself, depending on whether the user says yes or whether they say no, it is going to go down either this path or it is going to go down this path. So that's what we have right now with the candidate explorer, and these are the candidate intents after we have typed in the first message into our agent.